Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of the video lesson for section 10.4. We're going to take what we were doing with adding and subtracting and put it together with what we know about multiplying. Remember, the product rule for radicals says that if you have two separate roots multiplied together, you can put those together into just one root. The square root or any other kind of root of one thing times that same kind of root of another thing can be written as just one root of those two things multiplied together. So for example, the square root of 3 times the square root of 11 equals the square root of 33. 3 times 11 is 33, so the root of 3 times the root of 11 equals the root of 33. Also remember the basic algebra fact, the distributive property. When you have A times B plus C, you can distribute the multiplication over the addition, and it's A times B plus A times C. And remember that when you have two binomials multiplied together, you can multiply it out using the FOIL method. So something plus something times something plus something equals the first things multiplied together plus the outer terms plus the inner terms plus the last terms. So with that in mind, let's do some multiplication examples. The square root of 3 times the quantity square root of 5 plus square root of 3. So remember, the distributive property says that the square root of 3 on the outside of the parentheses is going to get multiplied by both of the terms inside the parentheses. We get root 3 times root 5 plus root 3 times root 3. Now, what does that give us? Root 3 times root 5 would be root 15. Plus root 3 times root 3 would be root 9. And do you see anything else we can do with this? Well, there's not really anything else we can do with the square root of 15, but the square root of 9 is 3. So I can end up by writing, okay, this is the square root of 15 plus 3. And notice how when you took the square root of 13 times another square root of 13, another way of thinking about what happened there was we had the square root of square root of 3 times square root of 3. We had the square root of 3 squared. Square root of 3 times itself would be the square root of 3 squared, and that would just be 3. So the square root squared, squaring undoes the square root and leaves you with just 3. What about this? 3 plus the square root of 5 times 3 minus the square root of 5. If we use the FOIL method, first we're going to get 3 times 3. Outside, we're going to get the 3 times the minus root 5, so minus 3 root 5. Inside, we're going to get plus root 5 times 3, so plus 3 root 5. And those are going to cancel. The minus 3 root 5 plus 3 root 5 are just going to add up to 0. And then last, the plus root 5 times the minus root 5 is going to be minus root 5 times root 5. And notice how the middle terms cancel because the two things we were multiplying together were the same except one had a plus and one had a minus. So really we just got the first thing times itself minus the last term times itself. 3 squared minus the square root of 5 squared. So 3 times itself is 9. The square root of 5 times itself is 5. Just like the square root of 3 squared was 3, the square root of 5 squared is 5. Notice we didn't have the square root of 3, we just had 3. And when we squared 3 or multiplied it by itself, we got 9. This was not 5, this was the square root of 5, so when we squared it, we got 5. And finally, 9 minus 5 is 4. So we ended up with 4. Next example, 2 root 3 minus 7 times 2 root 3 plus 7. Notice again, these are the same except one has a minus and one has a plus. So when we multiply it out, we're going to end up with the first thing times itself, the first thing squared, minus the second thing squared. because the middle two terms, the O and the I of FOIL, just add up to 0. So we have 2 root 3 times that, minus 7 times another 7. And when we take 2 root 3 times itself, 2 root 3 squared, 2 times 2 is 4, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. And then the 4 times the 3 is 12, minus the 7 times the 7 would be 49. And 12 minus 49 is negative 37. Okay, one more example to finish things up. Square root of y times, in parentheses, x plus the square root of y. Okay, so distribute, we get the square root of y times x, so x root y, plus the square root of y times the square root of y. So that would be the square root of y squared, or just y. So that's what we get, x root y plus y.